Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Tanya and You Chapter 39. Now, I must tell you that Chapter 39, a deep and profound chapter in the Tanya, these chapters that we're learning now, 38, 39, they're a little bit of a longer chapters, and the language that the Tanya uses is a little bit more esoterical, a little bit more Kabbalistic. But like everything, sometimes you have to remove some of the layers to understand the gist. What is the message of the chapter? So that's what we're going to try to do in today's class. Chapter 39 is like a direct continuation. You're like we're in the middle of a conversation. We're in the middle of a sentence almost. It's like the person who you're talking to and it says, "Hold it, you give me a minute," and they walk out of the room, they get involved in something else, and they come back an hour later and they continue exactly where they left off, right? So the division of chapters over here, 38, 39, 40, it's like one long conversation. So we're talking over here, the last few chapters, about the importance of the drive, the motivation behind what we're doing, behind our action. And just kind of just to step back a little bit, if you remember, we spoke about the emphasis that the Torah puts on action, how the main thing is to do it, based on the verse, la'asoso, to do it. The whole buildup of our psyche, our emotions, our intellect, it's all really all about the act. Did you do it or did you not do it? And ultimately, that's how we are closer to God. That's how we fulfill the mission of creation, etc., etc. And that's almost like a feel-good type of idea because it's easier to do than to feel, right? If you can say, I should act a certain way, even if I don't feel it, if I'm not passionate about it, I could do it. I could control myself. I'll do it. But you want me to also feel for it, that's already much more internal, which is not always so easy. However, in chapter 38, we started talking about the importance of the motivation, the importance of the reason why am I doing it. And in the words of the Tanya, we use the word kavana, which means the intent, could mean just to understand why am I doing it? What is the idea behind the mitzvah? For example, if you're going to say, what is the kavana of putting a mezuzah on your door? Okay, so you understand the significance of a mezuzah, and that's my kavana. But the Tanya takes us a step further, and the Tanya says the kavana is really about the life behind the mitzvah. Is the mitzvah a lifeless mitzvah? It's done without enthusiasm. It's done without passion. Or is it a mitzvah full of vitality, full of life, full of energy? And we use the terminology or the analogy of guf beli neshama, that you have a body and a soul, and a body without a soul is lifeless. So too, we have the body of the act is the act itself, and the neshama, the soul of the act, is the kavana, is the intent, is the motivation behind it. How is it done? Like we always say, God doesn't want us to do a mitzvah like we pay our taxes. Right now it's tax season, right? So we pay our taxes. And the IRS couldn't care less if you put your taxes, you pay the check, you put it in the mail, whether you're doing it with a smile or with a frown. The main thing is pay your taxes, right? Follow the law. That's all it is. Do the duty of paying taxes. As long as you did it, the motivation is insignificant. However, Hashem, God, wants our taxes and wants our mitzvahs, but He also wants it to be done with a smile. It should be done with that motivation. So that's the idea of the kavanah. So already in last week's chapter, we started talking about the various levels, the multiple levels um, that a person may have in this motivation. What type of passion? What is the motivation that is infused in this mitzvah, in this act? And we spoke generally about two types of motivations. One of them is the motivation which is an emotional motivation. It's for people who are generally emotionally charged, emotionally centered. And then we have those who are intellectually centered. It's an intellectual motivation. And this, by the way, is kind of similar to what we spoke about, if you remember, in the earlier chapters of the Tanya, where we have the first section through chapter 17, where we spoke about using our intellect to develop, to give birth to a new emotion in the heart, understanding how something is great and is lovable and it's amazing and important allows us to also develop something, a new feeling in our heart to be close to it, to want it, to love it. And then we spoke about in chapter 18 and on about this innate love that we have within us, the hidden love we spoke about, that we have naturally within us that just has to be tapped into and revealed. So here it seems like we're saying something very similar. What is the motivation of the mitzvah? One type of motivation is a emotional motivation. Emotional motivation is that we are excited to do this mitzvah. We have this natural excitement and we're charged to do the mitzvah. You see on my face, I'm doing the mitzvah with a smile. I come into synagogue and I'm putting some coins in a charity box. I'm not doing it just out of routine. I'm doing it with a smile and I'm happy. I'm running to synagogue. I'm excited to do a mitzvah. Emotionally, I'm very excited, right? That's innate love that we have, this natural love that we have within us. It's like an inborn trait that we follow. Now, what's the uh, deficiency with this motivation? The deficiency is that it's in a way it's very limited. It's limited to who I am, to my personality. We are all born with certain predispositions. We are all born with certain inborn traits. This is who I am. This is what gets me excited. This fits my personality. This I connect to. And therefore, I'm very excited to do it. So if someone is a naturally giving person, they're not very stingy, naturally. They have no time parting with their possessions, with their money, naturally. Comes to them easily. They have a natural sensitivity to others, an empathy to others. It comes naturally to them. So when it comes, for example, to the mitzvah of charity, they're very passionate about it. It comes naturally to them. And what's their motivation? It's not a dry act. They're not giving charity just because they have to, because they're told to, because it's the right thing to do. They're doing it because they understand that this is a beautiful way to connect with God. There's an excitement behind it. There's a passion behind it, which is beautiful. It is beautiful. However, the limitation is that what happens to this same person with a mitzvah that perhaps does not fit their natural personality, where it's something that has nothing to do with this kind, sensitive, giving type of personality. Maybe it's a mitzvah that does not really relate to them. It could be so many different examples, right? So for one person, let's say it's Shabbos. The idea of Shabbos is just, it doesn't talk to me. Doesn't I don't really relate to it. The idea of or any other mitzvah, right? From the 613 mitzvahs. It's just interesting as a parenthetic, being in the community and we see various people going on their journeys of getting more involved um, in incorporating Judaism more and more in their life. It's just very fascinating to notice various people take on certain mitzvot before the others. And for certain people, like this is a given. Just last night, I had a class in my house, and we had many people who like the go-to like beginning of their Jewish journey is prayer. To pray 3 times a day. This is like what they relate to. That's the beginning of it. But other areas of Judaism is very far from them. It's very difficult. And for other people that we know, perhaps kosher. I'm starting to keep kosher. That's the first thing I'm starting. It's not any other. I don't study Torah. I don't have a mezuzah on my door. Perhaps I don't keep Shabbos. I don't do anything else but kosher. Right? Everyone has what talks to them, what's most meaningful to them. So the positive side to this is that where you do have a passion, where a mitzvah that does relate to your natural disposition, in those areas, a person shines. We truly shine in that area. But the deficiency in this mode of motivation is that it's limited to my natural disposition. It's limited to my natural traits. And in an area where I don't feel passionate, because it is a emotional motivation. So if I'm not there emotionally, then I'm not there. So I'm lacking. So in certain areas, I have a lot of passion, but in certain areas, perhaps I have zero passion. And therefore, the Tanya says that this form of motivation is actually referred to like compared to an animal. Like an animal. Why like an animal? Because an animal has the same thing. The animal is passionate about certain things. Maybe it's passionate about finding food or passionate about anything else. But the animal doesn't have the ability to change their personality, to get involved in something that they don't want to, that's out of their comfort zone, it's out of their interest zone, right? So an animal just follows their inborn nature. That's who they are. And we have the same thing. We also have an inborn nature. And if we follow that, be it in good things, and that's great, but it's limited to exactly who I am. So that's that limitation. You know who else has this limitation? Or I should say, what else has the limitation? Angels. Malachim, angels. The Torah says have the same problem. Because angels have a certain personality, they have a certain character trait, whether it is kindness or whether it is discipline, severity, whether it is compassion, whichever of the various traits that this angel has, and the angel is only able to fulfill a mission that fits their trait. They can't change. They can't do something against their nature. Angels are very limited in the areas that they are involved in. Fits their trait. They shine. They excel. It's amazing. But in any other area, they fail. So the ability to kind of have a window and have a taste to the full scope of personalities, angels don't have, and we, human beings, when we have our motivation on only solely on an emotional level, we also have that limitation. So the Tanya calls this an animal passion, an animal motivation. Excellent where it's at, but terrible where we aren't. And then in the end of chapter 38, then going on to chapter 39, we introduce what we call the human passion. Now, even though if you take a look at the text of this chapter, we refer to this passion, this motivation, as designated to the greatest of the great, as we call them, the tzaddik, the most righteous of human beings. But we'll see soon that a little bit of it is connected, is related to each and every one of us. The human passion is people who are intellectually charged. They live they're centered by their intellect, and this is really the way that Tanya talks about the human condition. Really has this ability to live by our intellect. Earlier in Tanya, we used the term moyach shalit al halev. Our mind, our intellect, controls our heart, has the ability to control our heart. In other words, generally, we like to, the drive of life is generally emotionally. We know what's right, but we don't feel it necessarily. Which one overcomes? All too often, our heart overcomes our mind. But the tzaddik, the most righteous of human beings, they live in a certain reality where, or in a mode where they are fully running by their intellect. And because the intellect tells them that what is right, what is an idealistic lifestyle, and of course, a idealistic lifestyle for a Jew is to be connected to God through his Torah and his mitzvot, that is the way they live. Because ultimately, they mastered this ability to fully live by their intellect. And the beauty of this is that there's a lack of limitation in where my passion to a mitzvah will be felt. Because I am able to graduate my own limitation, my own inborn traits, my own natural passion, I am able to use my intellect to understand the objectivity of things and to appreciate ideas, areas where perhaps I don't have a natural disposition to it. So now I'm able to open and appreciate and experience the entire scope. So even a mitzvah where perhaps I don't naturally have an excitement for, but because I understand that this is the right thing to do, I will also have a passion for that as well. I'm able to explore new spaces. That's what the Tanya said. That's for the tzaddik. The tzaddik, their motivation comes from their intellect. Their intellect allows them to have this love and fear of God, and therefore it's expressed in all areas, even not where it comes naturally to me. That's the beauty. And then the Tanya introduces even a third type of motivation, which is we refer to as a godly motivation, where someone feels so connected with God. It's not even that I understand through my intellect that this is the right thing to do, and therefore I love it. It's that it's just who I am. It's like breathing, right? Do you think about your breathing? You shouldn't, right? If you're healthy, you just breathe. You never, even a baby, they don't learn how to breathe. It comes naturally to them. A healthy baby is born, they start breathing. They may have to learn how to eat. They learn how to talk. They learn how to walk. But breathing is just who I am, right? I used to take, when I was younger, I used to take speech therapy. I used to stutter, and every once in a while, you'll notice that I still stutter till today. So they would teach me breathing techniques. This is how you should breathe. I had to go home. I had this like homework and exercise of just breathing. And I'll tell you the truth, I hated it because to sit there and start breathing for 10 minutes, I can't do this, right? And when I'm studying this chapter of Tanya, I'm thinking, I know why I didn't like it. Because we shouldn't be thinking about our breathing. Breathing comes naturally to us. We don't use any part of our brain, our conscious brain at least, to think about our breathing. It's just this is who we are, right? We're alive, we're human beings, and we breathe. Imagine that if godliness was something that was so right and center in our natural consciousness that we don't even have to think about it. We're just so like this is just who we are. In Chassidus we say batel. We're like fully, subjugated to God. We're naturally all that we want to do is just godly things. These are the various motivations that the Tanya talks about. But the Tanya says that although the Beinuni, right, the average person, me and you, naturally we follow our nature, our inborn traits. So which areas are, and we see this in our lives, right? Which we know that there are so many things to do. Which ones do we choose to do? The ones that talk to us, the one that excites us, the one that we relate to, right? We don't do everything. We can't do everything, or we can't, at least, even if we are able to do everything, we're not passionate about doing everything. We're passionate with the areas of Judaism that relate to us. The same is true with like Torah study, for example, right? There are so many areas and topics and genres within the Torah, right? You see behind me, part of my library, right? So many different areas of Torah. We have the Talmud, we have Jewish law, we have scripture, we have Hasidic philosophy. There's so many different areas of Torah study, and not everyone has a passion in studying all areas because we have different ways of thinking. We're wired differently, so we are more excited with different areas of Torah. That's who we are. The tzaddik doesn't have that because the tzaddik is very idealistic and knows that it is right to have a very vast spectrum of all areas of Torah and all areas of Jewish life. So the passion is there equally everywhere. But the average human being is not able to attain that. It's not natural to us. However, the Tanya says that each and every one of us, once in a while, could have a taste of that type of life, could have a taste of what it means to be so connected with God that we have a passion in all areas, even when they are against our nature. It happens every once in a while. And just an interesting story that maybe relates to this. The Rebbe, we know, the Lubavitcher Rebbe taught various Hasidic melodies. Once a year, for the most part, going back to the 1950s, early 1960s. One of the melodies that he taught was a melody called Anim Zemiros. You may be familiar with it. I can sing for it, sing for you as well. Anim Zmiros. It's a nice, heartfelt Hasidic melody. And he told the story behind it. The story is basically with a wealthy Jew who meets a family who is struggling, and he goes to visit this family, and he sees that the father of the family is not there, and it's the wife and a few children, and he asks them, "What's going on? What happened to your husband?" And they say, "Well, the local duke, the local squire that we're renting from, we weren't able to keep up with the rent for the last few years, and it got to a point where he basically took my husband away, put him in this dungeon, in the cell, until we were able to pay up, which honestly, I don't think it's ever going to happen. We have years and years of debt. And basically, we realize that we're just going to basically be living, I'll be a widow, the children will be orphans. There's no way for us to get out of this." So this wealthier Jew says, "Tell me, how much do you owe?" And they say, "Listen, it's a lot. There's no way we could get help from the community. It's just too much." And he says, "No, tell me what it is." So she says the amount, which was a very large amount. She says, "Okay, let me see what I can do." So he leaves and he starts to write down all of his possessions, his house and his car, and his whatever horse and buggy and all his jewelry and all his investments and all his savings, everything that he has. You know what? It turned out to be just the right amount that was needed for this man to be released from the dungeon. So just a little extra for himself. So what does he do? He makes his major sale. He sells all of his possessions, and he comes to the squire and he says, "Listen, I know that this Jew is in your cell because he wasn't able to pay up the rent for the last few years. Here, take my money. Please release him." And he was very surprised. He says, "Really? All that money? It's a lot of money." He says, "Yes." And so that's what he does. Gives him the money, and he's released to his family. And he's so happy to see that. For those of you who are following the news in Israel, you see the release of the hostages this morning as well. I mean, your heart goes out. Wow, look at this family, a reunion. They never thought that they'll see them again alive. Amazing. And this Jew now is a poor man, nowhere to live, just a few ruble to get by, and he ends up actually moving away to a different town. He buys himself a small little hut. He has no job, he has no money, and he's having a little bit of a difficult time. And he doesn't even know what happened to that family. He left that family and he never checked in on them after that. He's happy that their husband's home and he did his mitzvah, and that's fine. Well, a while goes by, and this man has a dream. And in the dream, this husband that he released from prison comes to him in the dream. And he says, "Let me tell you something. First of all, thank you. Thank you for the great mitzvah of Pidyon Shavuim, to redeeming the captives." What a beautiful mitzvah. To redeem hostages, to redeem prisoners, innocent prisoners. You did a great mitzvah. What you did, you sold all your possession. Amazing. I want to let you know that when I came out, I was not in a good state of health. And just a few days after I was released, I passed away. I'm in heaven now. This is the dream that he has. I'm in heaven now. And I want to give you a reward. I want to repay you for all that you have done. And I want you to gain back all of your wealth. Now, in the dream, this man hears himself respond. And he says, "Thank you, but no thank you. I don't want to take away that mitzvah. I did it. I did it wholeheartedly. I did it sincerely. You don't have to repay me. I did it for the mitzvah." And this man in the dream says, "Okay, the second option, if you don't want to get your wealth back, I will give you the opportunity to taste, just to taste what it is, the spiritual pleasure that souls have in Gan Eden, in heaven. Would you want that?" And for that, he says, "You know what? That I'll take." And he woke up. He woke up from his dream. And he says, it was the following Yom Kippur. Usually he would sit, on the east side, right at the front of the shul. But this time he had no money, so he was all the way in the back of the shul. He put his talis over his head and he started praying. And he was singing a song. And this was the song that he was singing, Andim Zmiris. And as he's singing, he suddenly feels a tap on the shoulder. But he ignores it because he's involved in his prayer and his meditation. And then he feels another tap, and the third tap, and a fourth tap, until he looks around. He says, "What's going on over here?" And they tell him, "Mister, it's already the morning. It's the fast has been over for 12 hours already. It's time to break your fast." He was so involved in his prayer, in his song, that he didn't realize that the entire Yom Kippur went by, the entire night after Yom Kippur, it's ready the next morning. And he had that experience of Gan Eden as a body and soul, a soul in a body, like an out of body experience over Yom Kippur. And this was a song that he was singing, Anim Zmiros. And the Rebbe taught us this song. It's a beautiful, beautiful song, and it's a beautiful story behind the song. But I think it relates very directly to what we're saying over here, that there are certain moments in our life, certain times, that we're able to have a little taste of the experience of the tzaddik. As a side, the conclusion of the story, the Rebbe said that this story happened before the Hasidic philosophy was really taught to the world. Because if it happened later, the right thing to do would really be to accept the wealth, because if you have wealth, you're able to help other people. And ultimately, the most important thing is to help others. So that's a parenthetic, important conclusion to that story. But that's what the Tanya says, that although naturally most of us are emotionally centered people, however, from time to time, we're able to get a taste of what an intellectual person, centered person, not just a person who's intellectual, but a person who lives by that. And therefore, their intellect is able to to control their heart and to give birth to passion in areas where it doesn't come naturally. And the Tanya says there are certain times of the year as well, whether it's a Shabbos or Rosh Chodesh, which today is Rosh Chodesh, certain opportune times where a person can have this experience as well. Just to conclude, the chapter concludes with what happens if a person does not have the proper kavanah, the proper intent when they do a mitzvah, when they're not motivated properly, they're not motivated to do the mitzvah to connect with God. That's not their motivation. And what is their motivation? Maybe the motivation is for self-pride, for self-respect, or whichever other personal gain a person may have from Judaism, from the service to God, from study of Torah. Or perhaps a person doesn't have any motivation. They just do it because they do it, right? Like many of us, right? The Tanya talks about the importance of this motivation, because when you have this motivation for ourselves, it's important, but also it allows the spiritual effect of the mitzvah to elevate, to ascend to heaven. It's like wings to a bird. It puts wings on our actions, and our actions are able to ascend to heaven. That's what the Tanya says, right? It's something that perhaps we don't really are not so in tune with. There's an interesting story. I know I'm a little over time already, but there's an interesting story with the Baal Shem Tov. He came into a synagogue, and everyone was praying with great fervor, and it was a beautiful, beautiful synagogue. And he comments and he says, "I don't see any prayer over here. There's no prayer in the synagogue." Okay. He walks down the block to a different synagogue, and over there, no one's praying properly. People are talking, people are walking, people are schmoozing. It's a terrible, terrible scene for a synagogue. And the Baal Shem Tov comments and says, "Ooh, there's a lot of prayer here. A lot of prayer in the synagogue." So his disciples asked him, "What do you mean? What are your comments all about?" So he says, when we pray with proper kavana, with a proper motivation and the proper intent, it lifts our prayers to heaven. It's wings to our prayers and allows it to soar high. So when we're doing it properly, like the first synagogue, it all left. There's no prayers lying around in the synagogue because they all went to heaven. In the second synagogue, where no one was praying properly, all the prayers just remained here. It didn't leave the room. So there's so many prayers. So the point is, whether it is a prayer, a Torah study, or a general doing our mitzvahs, the more kavana we have, the motivation that we have behind it, the passion, the excitement, the enthusiasm that's the drive behind the mitzvah, that allows the mitzvah to ascend to heaven. And even if we have not had that proper kavana, it's not too late, because if today I did something without the proper kavana, and tomorrow I do have the proper kavana, it works retroactively to allow to attach wings to all the actions that I've done previously and allow them to ascend as well. So I'll leave you with that. And like I said, it's kind of in the middle of an idea. We continue where we left off next week in chapter 40 to understand the importance of this of the motivation behind the mitzvah. So that's that. I'll leave you with that. Have a good week. Have a Shavua Tov, a good Shabbos. and looking forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Rabbi. That was